Hi, this is Sunday, January 28th, 2024, and we are now broadcasting live on YouTube on our usual
Sunday, January
monthly
2024.
start over.
We are now broadcasting.
I'll start over. Okay. Hi, this is Mel Spencer, and today's Sunday, January 28th, 2024. And this is Project Save the World, and we are about to launch our monthly town hall meeting. I have to admit that this last month was the first time we've missed a town hall since it started because it was Christmas. And so we deferred it, although actually a few people showed up and we did have a conversation, but I didn't treat it as a town hall. So we're going to get started now. I see that Marilyn Krieger has arrived, and I'm going to let her in the door. I have to admit people, and she will tell us how the cats in California are doing. And I expect that any minute now we'll have other people who will show up, and we'll have a good conversation about whatever is on people's minds. So, hello, Marilyn.
Hi.
Hi, how are you?
Well, actually, I am here. I had a standard procedure where they did a biopsy and I bled out and ended up in the ER and hospitalized and was recently released. Yes,
When did this happen?
on Friday. A week ago Friday. A week ago Friday. Yeah.
A week ago Friday. Yeah, okay.
Well, I'm better, but I tell you, I lost so much blood and it's so hard to recover. I can barely move around. I'll start walking and I just awful.
Oh gosh. Well, now tell me why, what would have caused excessive bleeding from a biopsy? I thought they just took a little snip of something.
Well, what happened is that, I mean, I hate to be scatological here, but I have been diagnosed with something called microscopic colitis, and they had to do a colonoscopy and take a few biopsies. And apparently when they cauterized and they clipped the biopsy areas, and apparently at least one of them anyway didn't hold.
Oh dear. And you were in hospital, so then they moved you to the emergency, or what happened?
No, I had the biopsy previously a week before, and so I was in my house in the mountains, and medical care isn't very nearby, so I managed before extreme hemorrhaging. I managed to get over the hill into where there is medical to my other home, which is where I am now. Thank goodness, because I had to call the ambulance. It was really serious.
Well, I'm so sorry. Oh dear. Did you have any reason to expect anything like that?
No.
No.
Was, really,
You've got to promise me it's never going to happen again.
That what? Oh, yeah, well.
You promised me.
Yeah, right, exactly. Right. Yeah, so that's kind of what I've been doing.
Okay, well.
Bill, by the way, is going to be late because he got out into his cameras, checking his cameras late. So he's going to be late on the call.
Well, I imagine there'll be a lot of people who won't show up because I have a peculiar new problem. This computer that we're using has a non-functioning keyboard. So,
oh my goodness.
And I had delayed sending reminders to people, or information. And so as of Saturday, yesterday, I found myself having to send notices to some people, but not being able to access a keyboard. So it has been the most interesting day. It's like it's probably good for my brain. You know, they say that if you're slipping, one thing you can do to help it is to try to do things differently, like brush your teeth with the other hand, or
Yeah.
button your clothes with the wrong hand or something. And I don't practice these rigorous disciplines, but in this case, it forced me to do things like if I wanted to write, what I could do is I could go to my iPad and I could write there, but the addresses and the email addresses are stored on this computer.
Mm.
So I would have to copy the email addresses
Oh,
and send myself an email
oh yes.
containing the addresses, then go to the iPad and email it, paste it in and email it there. And then if I had some information on the iPad that I wanted to transfer to my main computer, I had to reverse the procedure to sending it by email. And I wanted to send the notices out from the main computer. So so it meant writing a letter in on the iPad and emailing it to myself, and then copying it and pasting it into a new email on this computer, and then getting all of the addresses and pasting them in. So it's like trying to brush your teeth with the wrong hand. It feels so strange. I usually use a Command V or keyboard thing.
Tell me, have you gotten the keyboard issue straightened out? Is it a
I spilled
wireless?
water. I now realize that I had spilled water on it. I didn't
Oh,
pay
okay.
attention when it happened, but after the whole computer went crazy for a few hours, then finally it dawned on me what had happened. So we have ordered, and Amazon will be delivering a new keyboard to me. Could be possibly out in the hall already.
Good,
I'm not going to go look because
good,
even if it's there, it's supposed to come before 10 p.m. tonight. And
good, good.
even if it's there, it won't. I don't want to try to attach it now because it has a built-in cord that stretches. You can't. It's not a plug-in cord, and it goes to the back of the monitor. And I have the monitor set up in a very precarious position, surrounded by a lot of other things. So I'm more likely to knock over my monitor than to attach my keyboard successfully. I'm hoping somebody will come and see me, somebody who's more physically agile than I am, who
Yeah.
can plug in my new keyboard when it arrives. Anyway, here's Richard Denton, allegedly, at least for 1 second I saw you.
Hello.
Hello,
Hello.
Richard.
Hello. I'm traveling in the car, so
Oh, okay. Well, we'll accept your postage stamp reproduction of the real man. So where are you traveling to and from, and why? Give an account us.
okay. Well, I'm traveling from Owen Sound, where my son Tim lives, and we just celebrated my wife's 71st birthday,
Well,
and now traveling home.
happy birthday, Biz. Is Biz there in the car
Thank
with
you.
Nice to know that you've reached grown-up age, Biz. I hope you're going to start comporting yourself more soberly than these flighty things that you've done as a child.
True.
Hold on. I'm gonna mute for just a minute. I'll be
Okay.
back.
All right. So Okay, Biz, how did you celebrate your birthday?
She celebrated in the Indian fashion. We were in India, as you know, twice this past year.
Mhm.
So she had a birthday with friends on Tuesday, another birthday with friends on Thursday, and two birthday cakes on Saturday.
2 birthday cakes. Well, that sounds spectacular. That's wonderful.
Exactly. Well, one was a cupcake, so
That's good.
but,
Well,
but still,
so
that counts. I had a candle on it.
what does, hello, Bill Lycum. My goodness, you
Yeah.
gotta speak. Oh, there you go. You're with your hat against and your backdrop of, I doubt that Richard and Biz can see you. Richard, can you see anything in your car or not?
No, I did catch a glimpse of him in a silver fox.
That's right. That's his I don't know what do you call it, a career or a passion or both.
Oh,
We call him the Foxman,
yeah.
and I call Marilyn the cat lady.
hmm And that's a gray fox, by the way.
Is it?
Yeah.
Okay. Uh, so both of you are naturalists in California, and you're friends of each other. So I expect I'm sure you find ways of promoting nature in California. How is it going in California?
Well, there are a lot of bumps along the way. And sometimes you think you're not making any progress and somebody else tells you you are. And so, but one thing happened. That gray fox behind me there is the male Limos, and he died of canine distemper. And his mate, Big Eyes, recently died of canine distemper as well. So now, in terms of my study on their behavior, I'm going to have to wait it out and see when another pair of foxes will come into that habitat and occupy it and claim the about quarter-mile square territory for their own. And they may have pups. These two didn't. So we'll see how things go. You just got to kick back and let nature do its thing. And if you can help it along, okay.
Mhm. Well, tell me about canine distemper. I think I had a dog that died of it when I was a child.
Oh boy,
He was just sort of flailing around, wasn't able to walk properly. Is that the symptom?
that's the end symptoms of what happens.
Uh,
Canine distemper is particularly vicious in that it attacks the gastrointestinal system, then the respiratory system, and the neurological system. And so that's why when they're at their last legs, they can't move very well. They just kind of their nervous system is being attacked, is what's going on.
Well,
And
now, did they catch it together, or did one infect the other, or was it so far apart that you think, or is there a latency? Could one have caught it and not shown any effect for months or years?
well, yeah, they can catch it and last for a while. The first group of foxes that I did study on, they died out from canine distemper at 2016. And the state veterinarian said that when gray foxes or any canine actually gets canine distemper, they can live a maximum of 2 weeks. That's not true. I went back after that big die out of 25 foxes. I went back into my archives, and in 2012, one of the foxes that was living in that area had all the symptoms of canine distemper. And she lasted for 5 years. And so her immune system was working overtime more than likely, but she lasted a lot longer than any of the state people claim.
Well, now would you have concluded then that your female fox caught it from her partner and then outlived him?
Well, that's probably what happened. Mhm.
Mhm.
He probably picked it up somewhere, and we've pursued the question of where does it come from? Because it does not come from domestic dogs, or which is the likely scenario that a lot of people say. You know, did they catch it from dogs? No, no. And going back to the state veterinarian, I asked her that question, and she said that it's as if the virus is in the dirt. She said it's all over the state of California, and she gets die-out reports from various places in the state of California every single year. And so it's endemic to California
Mhm.
and probably elsewhere too, but I only know the California group.
Well, here, I want to remind you, because I have to remind myself, that you are actually talking about one of the 6 global threats that Project Save the World deals with. One of them is called pandemics. And so we have a platform for survival, which consists of 25 proposals, like a political party's platform. But this is a more enduring one. We formed it back in 2018. And when it comes to talking about what we need to do to stop pandemics, the main thing is there's an approach called One Health, which integrates medicine for people with the medical issues and the environmental issues of animals as well. So sometimes, of course, there are certain viruses or bacteria that can affect both of us, animals and people. But mostly what we have several times done is we have put on forums, talk shows, in which we get medical and veterinary people together to talk about their common concerns, because it really makes very good sense to talk about the environment and epidemiology in the same framework for both animals and people. So I think that Richard Denton is still here with us, although his face.
I'll jump in here.
Yeah,
And
I should
certainly,
let me introduce you, because I don't know whether you've been introduced before. Bill and Marilyn are in California, and as you know, they're environmentalists. But Richard is a retired physician in around Sudbury, Ontario. So Richard, chime in.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Meta, and greetings to you, Bill, in California. Certainly, there is an overlap in terms of animals spreading disease to humans. We have swine flu, we have bird flu, and the latest COVID. We're not quite sure whether it was released from a lab dealing with highly virulent viruses, or whether it was from bats or from the wet market in China. But those are all possibilities. And so you do have problems from animals to humans. You also have the problems in agriculture, where agriculture uses large amounts of antibiotics that then creates resistance in bacteria to those antibiotics, and then that creates problems with us humans because the bugs, bacteria then become resistant to the antibiotics that we want to use to treat infections from them. So that's another aspect. The third aspect, of course, is prevention. And we look at vaccination. Now, vaccination, I think we've sort of grew up with polio, tetanus, measles, mumps, diphtheria, chickenpox, where those vaccinations are probably 95% effective and really low in terms of side effects. Unfortunately, though, if we're using attenuated viruses, which means partially killed viruses, there is a slight chance of the vaccine giving the disease to people. And we do see that in polio. I'm involved in Rotary, and we are trying to rid the world of polio like we have done with smallpox. And we do have a few cases of vaccine-induced polio because we're inoculating, millions of children worldwide. The second thing on vaccinations is that some vaccinations are not that successful in eradicating or preventing the disease. So I can think of the shingles vaccine. When I first took it, it was about 60% effective, which is not very good.
Yeah.
And what we've seen also with the COVID is that
Hold on, Richard. Now, if I'm not mistaken, that's the caused by the chickenpox, isn't it? The virus of
Correct.
chickenpox lies in your body for many years and then busts out and gives you shingles.
Correct.
Now you said you mentioned chickenpox vaccine back in when you started, and I wondered is the vaccine for shingles the same thing as a vaccine for chickenpox, or is it
No,
somehow different? No.
no, I think they're different.
Oh.
But or actually, maybe I'm a little rusty here, so there may not be a chickenpox vaccine, but there's certainly a vaccine against shingles. And when it first came out, it was about 65% effective. They've come out with a newer, improved one, which is much more effective. But again, we've seen this with COVID too, is that the COVID vaccines are not 90% effective, and you need to again keep getting boosters, and then sometimes the vaccine gives side effects similar to the disease, which again is difficult to interpret. So those
Yes,
are all.
Do they ever give or try to vaccinate wildlife? In other words, if Bill had a vaccine for distemper, I don't know whether the one exists or not, would anybody try to go around and, I don't know, sneak up on a gray fox and give it a shot? What would you do? Yeah, Marilyn. You're muted here. No, you're still muted.
Okay, there we are. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Good. The problem with doing that is that it'd be extremely highly stressful for animals. And how would you catch them, to do something like that? And essentially you would have to dart them and use usually what they do when they dart animals and they like put collars on them or check them out or whatever, they use something called ketamine, which is highly stressful. And it would be impossible to get all of the animals really, to do that. It's kind of an impossible thing. So unfortunately, and also the diseases are also zoonotic in the other way. So for instance, cats caught COVID from people. So, yep, so
Well,
it
is
works
it,
both
is
ways.
there anything like an epidemic among the cat population?
No, no, not really. I don't know. I think there's something, and Richard may know more about this, what happened or what is happening in Cyprus. I think it's in Cyprus. Yes, in Cyprus with, and I'm just trying to get my brain around it because it happened not within the last 5 months, and it was about an epidemic of, I don't know if it was canine distemper or something, but it was such, it jumped species. Anyway, it's different. It somehow or other mutated and became extremely zoonotic, and it's very concerning.
And affected people?
No,
No?
that didn't affect people. It affected other species, and I'd have to go back and find that article and read. I've read all the studies about it, but it's been a while. So my brain isn't operating 100% right now because of I don't know what happened, what I was telling you before. So I'm not
Yeah.
100% with it yet. But anyway, I should go, what I can do is go back and see if I can find that article, and then I can send it to you. So you can
Well,
see
what we can
what's
always
happening.
do is post it on the comments column
Yeah.
of the,
Okay.
when you go, I should say this for everybody, because I
Feel
wish people would use our website more. It's
Okay.
really meant for you, and it's cost my life savings practically to build the thing, and it's not used. And that is, if you wait till I edit and put this show up on tosavetheworld.ca, you can find it by the scroll window. Hi Sandy, we have a scroll window on the home page. So you can scroll up and down and look for any of this will be 582, episode 582 so far. And you can scroll and then click on that and it'll open and you can look at the show, or you can listen to it on YouTube. I mean, as an audio podcast. And we actually need somebody who will help us make transcripts. We can make the transcripts very well using machines, but they need to be cleaned up afterward because the machines never are very good. And I don't want to put it up until we get somebody who'll clean them. And I don't have time to do it. So I'm very eager if somebody has some spare time and speaks English, we will use that. But the main thing is if you go after you've watched the show, you want to comment, there's a button that says click here and it'll take you someplace where you can enter your comments. And I'd really like it if people would go there and continue their conversations, because we do have the chat box here for all Zoom people, but that only shows the people who are on the show on the Zoom. And later I can put it up, but it's not as useful as it would be if people could go there regularly. Anyway,
I want to go back to that, the vaccination and so forth like that. I do know that for canine distemper, they have attempted to produce some we can't call it a vaccination, but an edible, let's call it a vaccination, okay? An edible that the animals can eat, and it will have the same effect as a vaccination with a needle. But they, so far, they haven't been very successful with it. It's got to go through a lot of trials, a lot more trials, and it has to be improved considerably before it would be useful in the field.
Bill,
Mm-hmm.
would you say, and it might be something to bring up here about how the fragmentation of the environment, and you have animals, this is also with the the cats, the felines too, that are used to wandering and going to separate areas. And now that their environments and their habitats are being fragmented, and so what's happening, there is probably maybe an increase in disease. And so canine distemper, for instance, is highly catchable. But anyway, Bill can address that.
Yeah. What should I address? That it's catchable?
Well, what you're seeing in the Baylands, perhaps, maybe what you're seeing with the Baylands.
Well, yeah, back in the 80s and early 90s, the water district here in the Silicon Valley, it's called Valley Water, decided to lay down concrete in all of the channels of the creeks that are being the watershed off of the Santa Cruz Mountain Range. And by doing so, they cut off a natural passageway between the San Francisco Bay Baylands and the upper reaches of the Santa Cruz Mountains. So what we have now is an isolated population of not only foxes, but raccoons and possums, skunks, and so forth, that are creating a very unhealthy environment. Because the transmission of disease is when you're crowded like that, the transmission of disease is very, very high and rapid. So one of the things that I'm trying to get the city of Palo Alto to do is to strip that concrete out of the channel on at least Matadero Creek. If I could get them to do that, then maybe we can start to address some of the other creeks so that this fragmentation is ameliorated and we have passageways, as I said, from the bay to the mountains and from the mountains to the bay, thus creating a more healthy genetic pool.
Mhm. Well, now, I'm not clear about what happened. There are creeks, is it a road or something that interrupted the possibility of crossing?
There were creeks, okay, that were coming off
Yeah.
off the Santa Cruz Mountains.
And they
They-
concrete there or something?
Well, yeah, they changed the channels in a lot of cases, and they put concrete in so that no plants or no vegetation will grow in that concrete, of course. And the wildlife that lives, let's say, in the Santa Cruz Mountains up there, will not come down into those concrete channels because there's no protection. They're fully exposed out in the open, and so they stop and they won't go. The same holds true for the critters that are in the San Francisco Bay Baylands. They won't go up those channels either, and so we fragmented the whole environment of all of the creeks except one that's coming off the Santa Cruz Mountain Range down into the San Francisco Bay.
Yeah.
Well, in addition to not only the cement in the creeks, but you also have buildings, you have highways, you have just urbanization and all, which is creating these little pockets. What's happening, you have little pockets of wild space now. So then you start getting more population in there and you get inbreeding and problems with that. And it's hard for them, these animals, in order they need to get to these little like postage stamps of area until they can get into a big wild space. And that's I'm seeing that with what I'm doing with the lions and the bobcats. So
And also, I just add that this is these concrete channels are contributing to flooding because while it does take the water down the channel, it takes it down very quickly. And when you're getting torrential rains up in the mountains, etc., can exceed the size of the channel, and you'll get flooding in the surrounding area. Whereas naturally, if you have swampland, it acts as a sponge and will absorb floods much better, as well as you've mentioned, providing areas for wildlife, etc. So these concrete channels are not a good thing in terms of flooding or in terms of wildlife.
Are they still putting them in, or has somebody learned a lesson and decided to revert to more natural environment? Does anybody know?
There are groups of people on coastal areas that are planting mangrove swamps to protect the coastline and that sort of thing. And you are having various cities that are putting in these damper wetlands, but I would say it's still to a small, they're not being used as widely as they could be.
Yeah.
I should greet Sandy Greer, who's come in a few minutes ago. Hi, Sandy. How are you?
Good afternoon, everyone. It's nice to be here. Sorry I was a bit late.
There's a third person here, a fourth person that you haven't seen, but you've now heard him, and that's Richard Denton. In case you were wondering who that guy was just talking, it's Dr. Richard Denton. And
Yes.
you may even know each other because he's also been engaged in work about radioactive contamination and so on. I don't know whether you actually do similar things or not, but when I was involved more with Science for Peace, he gave a series of, at least several times he came in and lectured about how radioactive material affects the body, fissile material, what different kinds of rays do to us, our cells, and so on. So, but you don't have to worry about that so much as where you're going to put the stuff, right? That's your game. Yeah. So
Yes.
how's your game coming?
Well, today I had Quaker worship this morning with Tony McQuail, whom you know, Meta. He apologizes.
My regards.
He apologizes that he usually can't come. He's so busy on the farm. And so he invited me to join his Quaker group might be almost 10 years ago now, because both of us were working to fight against the Deep Geological Repository on Radioactive Waste. Like both of them, like the first one got voted totally against, thank heavens, by the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation. But now we're fighting against a high level proposed radioactive waste dump, which there's going to be a referendum on this September. So he and I and another person are working like crazy. How can we get more public education out more widely to inform people about the environmental dangers? So keep pretty busy.
Well, how are you going about it? And by the way, Richard, were you aware of what she's talking about? Because that'll give me an indication of whether or not she's succeeding in getting the word spread.
Yeah, definitely I'm aware of it, and definitely there are problems. The various proposals for the deep geological are Bruce and Ignace are the two sites that are being proposed, and then there's the dump on the Ottawa River beside Deep River. So that's another area of concern.
Yeah, that's the Chalk River project for what's called a near surface disposal facility, and it's totally controversial. There was a petition being circulated by Ole Hendrickson, who I believe composed this wonderful petition against accepting it. And would you believe that what has happened, and again, it needs to be made known more publicly, is while this petition, which stated good reasons why there should be a delay, at least a delay on the project, never mind stopping it altogether. That got sabotaged by the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission, who made a decision to give a license
Mm.
to the proponent, which is called Canadian Nuclear Laboratories, even though I think they're owned mostly by multinationals outside Canada, but that's our situation. So the CNSC, who is supposed to be Canada's nuclear regulatory commission to protect the public, it actually, a lot of us who have been working on nuclear waste for some years believe that the CNSC instead is totally captured by the nuclear industry and gives a green light to any and every project which is proposed by players in the nuclear industry. So right now, I actually wrote to Brian Mass some days ago, who is the federal MP down in Windsor, Ontario, and he's NDP, and he is the official critic about Great Lakes Basin issues, and also has a role in Canada-US border relations. So I wrote to him about whether he could get some parliamentary discussion to happen about, you know, the ethics behind this petition being terminated even before it got completed, and people were given the full time to sign it, even though more than 3,000 people signed it in a very short period of weeks. It was amazing. But it should be allowed to be discussed in Parliament with that many people signing it. So I wrote to him whether he could work with a Liberal MP, Sophie Chattel, I think her name is. She's in Liberal caucus in Quebec, but she was the one that posted the petition on the federal website. And so whether they could work together to get a parliamentary discussion about this. And there's going to be other strategies sorted out, because the Algonquin First Nations, what they argue legitimately is that they were not properly consulted. And so this decision has violated the United Declaration on, Indigenous peoples' human rights, because they are supposed to come into a project to have a say early in the project, and this did not happen. And so there's been a few articles, thank goodness, on CBC, Canada's national broadcast network, to point out that the Algonquin people now are going to take legal action. And so I hope they get a lot of allies by us non-Indigenous people to fight this, because it's so totally unethical. And it's so obviously dangerous. And, about the contamination that could go into the Ottawa River and all the way down, eventually, and contaminate a lot of water pathways, aside from affecting the animals, the wildlife, and so on. It's just atrocious.
What's the solution?
Solution is to change the legislation, I think, in Canada. That's a big one. But because in Canadian legislation, the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission is given so much power that they're basically operating without any way to stop them from their own self.
Yeah, but I think Bill is asking what is always the question in my own mind is, if you don't bury it, what are you going to do with it?
Oh, okay. I'm sorry, I misunderstood your question, Bill. Well, yes, something has to be done about it. Now, another member of our organization here who does immense amounts of volunteerism is Dr. Gordon Edwards, who occasionally appears, but the man is so busy, God bless him, doing so much volunteerism on all of these nuclear issues and giving, talks as much as he can and so on. And he's really one of the experts in Canada about anything to do with nuclear issues. And so what he recommends is a rolling stewardship plan, that, in other words, until we can think of a wiser and safer way to deal with the nuclear waste, we need to have a rolling stewardship that through each generation, until we might be able to create a technology that actually would be safer. We need to keep it where it is, which is in above ground containers, which are monitored 24/7. There's never been a problem in 40 years. And that's where it has been, the nuclear waste in Canada. And in contrast to this proposed deep geological repository, and not one exists yet anywhere in the world because it is so controversial and experimental. And there's no scientific evidence to say that it's going to be safe in the short term or the long term. And so the rolling stewardship would buy us time to think of more intelligent ways to deal with it, because yes, we have to deal with it. And in the United States as well. And
you know, the problem is, it's obviously there is no answer really. That and to me it is, I don't know whether it's an open question, because I tend to believe my friends. My friends are like you, but if I were just having to make judgments on my own without the kind of evidence that I think is required, I would actually not know whether to support allowing this stuff to be kept above ground or put it in a mine someplace or something like that, because I worry that, you know, yes, nothing has happened yet, but if somebody wants to crash an airplane into the storage unit where all of the waste material is kept, or there could be even an earthquake or some, who knows what, it could be, you know, that's could be a catastrophe too. So it is like I don't think there's any good solution, and it always looks to me like it's a toss-up almost. And
well,
I hate to say that because I love you, but I don't.
well,
I'm not sure what to believe, honestly.
yeah, well, you know, the whole idea of potential terrorism does come up, and that's one of the reasons or rationales which the nuclear industry uses, that we got to move it out from above surface. But honestly, if there's going to be bombs dropped, what's to stop, you know, the terrorists from hitting where there's waste disposal sites as well, right? And the thing is, right now, so this is what I know from doing 10 years of research on this and being very active, writing letters to government and so on, is that to put it 600 meters underground, it's still experimental because it's never been done anywhere yet on the planet. And the first country that will be probably the number one to actually make it happen is Finland. But guess what? Not for the first time. There is another delay in Finland being given an operating license by the Finnish government because of unresolved problems. And so, yes, the Finnish government gave a license for constructing the shafts. And so what's happened is that people in Ontario have been wined and dined and had their trips paid to go and look at this wonderful, all these wonderful shafts and so on, and the above ground replacement facility. In other words, any waste that is transported to the site then has to be repackaged. And that is another area of concern about potential releases of radionuclides and so on above ground during the repackaging process. So something goes wrong before it even goes underground. But the thing is, the operating license is delayed again. So why is it being delayed again? And if you read anything written by the nuclear industry or the proponent Nuclear Waste Management Organization, they put a spin on it, you know. But the thing is that there are still controversies, for example, about the copper canister in which, you know, the fuel bundles would be placed, and that the copper is still being studied in Canada as well as elsewhere because it hasn't been resolved to guarantee sufficiently that it won't corrode and then release radionuclides into the water pathways. So
maybe the only solution is to stop building nuclear facilities.
I would agree with that, Bill. And again, Gordon Edwards has said that they are not useful to fight climate change because one, it takes 10 plus years to build a new unit, and two, it's frightfully more costly than renewables.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And right now, more people are working in the renewable field than are working in Canada's tar sands.
You know, it looks to me like I have a new bee in my bonnet. I'm constantly now thinking about something called citizens' assemblies. And I've known about it and been interested for some time, but suddenly it's become front and center in my thinking. I've just been reading a book by a man named Maurice Pope, who wrote it maybe 15, 20 years ago, and lost the manuscript because nobody would publish it. He's a classics professor at Oxford, and he was somebody who was studying Athenian democracy. And my concern has become that I think our democracies are not working. We're going to have 80 elections this year around the world. And I am terrified that what we're going to have is an upsurge in authoritarian rule all around the world. And because people are finding that even the governments that are longtime so-called democracies are not functioning properly. There are all kinds of problems that are not succeeding. And the good question is, what is it that's failing the worst, and why are people upset, especially? But in any case, I think the answer consists of going back to Athens and learning from them, because what they call democracy is not what we would call democracy. We don't have it except for juries. That is, you take a cross section, a random sample of the population, and you put them in charge of making policy about contentious issues. So I think the question of what to do with nuclear waste and nuclear power, and whether to continue investing in it or whether to phase it out, whatever, those questions need to be done by the whole global population. And they can only be done by a cross section of the global population that's sampled so as to be completely representative, and then have them study the issue, because it's stupid to ask people to go to a referendum and vote about something they don't know beans about. And I would be one who would not know how to vote. So, and I'm, somebody who's spent a lot of time thinking about these things, but I don't know enough. So I think what we need is something like a citizens' assembly to deliberate for a year with all of the evidence and expertise that we can draw on, and have ordinary people think this through and make a decision that then should be adopted in the governance structures, the legislatures, and so on of the world. I started talking about this the other night in one of the editorial meetings of Peace Magazine, and two of the senior people on the team jumped all over me and absolutely thought it was a ridiculous idea. But I have now seen enough evidence that it is not a ridiculous idea. The OECD, this is becoming a very popular notion, attempting to solve thorny policy issues like this with citizens' assemblies drawn by lot so that they're really representative, especially in Europe now. The OECD published a report, I think it was 2 years ago, in which they looked at 800 citizens' assemblies around the world. It has been done very widely now, and it's catching on and being adopted even more widely. But the point is that if you ask people to vote in an election, they by and large vote the party line, or they vote in terms of their ethnic identity or something like that interferes with the rational discussion of the policy issues. But if you, and that's true for referenda as well, because that's just a vote without thinking. But if you have people, a good cross-section of people, and they study an issue for a long time, seriously, as a jury does when they're selected in court, then they actually make very good decisions by and large, and better than we're getting out of our elected officials. Okay, now I've had my fling of talking about what's interesting to me, but how would people feel about trying to get a citizens' assembly, even if we only did it for Canada, to think about what are we going to do about these waste materials?
Well, I'll jump in there because on Monday I went to see my MP and was asking her to support Bill M86, which is for a fair vote in the federal politics, federal legislation. And so what it is recommending is, of course, proportional representation. And this would certainly make our democracy much stronger. What is happening, of course, in the States is you have the gerrymandering, changing electoral boundaries to suit the ruling party to get more seats. You're having disenfranchisement of the poor, the blacks, the Hispanics, the homeless, so that they won't be able to vote. And so the home of, quote, democracy, unquote, and I'm being sarcastic there, of the US is that it is not all that democratic. So there is a, excuse me, a citizens assembly, as you say, looking at the fair vote and promoting it, and is trying to contact all the various MPs to support it. The Bloc and the NDP are currently going to support it. It's interesting that this was supported by the Liberals at their policy convention, but was then vetoed by the PMO office. And there's probably about, I think we've got about 50 Liberals now who are supporting this fair vote proportional representation now. And it's being, again, lobbied by a citizens' assembly. So I strongly agree with you, Meta, that this is a great idea. You're spot on. And we should be using this to a much greater degree as you're suggesting.
Wonderful. Well, now, what will happen to those 50 Liberals if they vote for something that the PMO doesn't want them to support?
It depends on whether they're given a free vote to vote with their conscience, and this has happened on various occasions on contentious issues, or whether the party whip will try to keep them in line, and what they may not do, or what they may do then, is simply not show up for the vote if they're forced to vote the party line.
What does your MP say? That, I mean, you lobbied her. Now, what was her reaction to all this?
Well, she got her marching orders from the PMO's office, although she did agree that the policy convention of the Liberal Party voted in favor of it. And so she said she would look into it, so whether she looks into it or votes for it when it comes up in the House to be voted on remains to be seen.
Well, what do you think? I mean, I've been told, I also called my MP and just left a phone message that I hope he would vote for this measure. Of course, a proportional representation is a whole lot better than what we have now, this first past the post kind of thing. But nevertheless, even PR legislatures around the world are messing up royally, bad decisions are coming. And I guess I took it for granted. It was like I believed in democracy, what I called democracy all my life. In fact, it turns out that until about after the founding of the U.S., when the founding fathers voted for representation rather than direct democracy, it was only then that the term democracy came to be used to apply to representative government. I didn't know that, but always before it was assumed by Aristotle and everybody else in the ancient world and later that if you have an election, well, it might work fine for once or twice, but eventually what will happen is you'll just pick among various potential oligarchs to rule you. You will not be governed. The governments by people will not really take place. That representation is simply another word for oligarch rule. And that's how most oligarchs have come to power, is by being elected. So they use the word democracy only for sortition, that is, government by bodies of councils or committees or so on that are randomly selected from the population. The book that I've been reading is a wonderful revelation about how the Greeks actually ran their day-to-day affairs using committees. It's quite a surprising thing to me, and quite surprising that you can gives me reason to begin again to trust the notion that ordinary citizens can use common sense if they're put into positions where they really have to make serious decisions, and they know they're responsible for the governance. They generally make good decisions, because I've come to believe in the last little while that democracy produces no better results in terms of sensible decision making than anybody else, and that is a tragic thing to believe. If you really believe that a representative government is not going to produce sensible decisions, and if you look at the history of, well, Brexit or Trump or anybody else, Modi now in India, looks like real democracies can pick some real losers or stupid people for their rulers. And but if put into a situation where they're seriously to deliberate for a period of time before making a decision, then apparently ordinary people make good decisions by and large. Everybody's human. Anyway, I can't get off my soapbox, can I? So shut up.
Well, again, I think in Athens, only the men voted, and it's been just recently that we've got women suffragette being able to vote. And as I said, in the States, you have the gerrymandering and the disenfranchisement of large groups of people. And I think it was Churchill who said democracy is a lousy system, but it's better than anything else. And then the other quote is people get what they deserve when they vote. So,
well, when he said about democracy, he was calling Republican, what do you call it? Representative governance democracy. And I have decided, based on what I've been reading now, that I'm going to stop using that word to mean it what I've always used it to mean. In other words, I don't think what we have is democracy. I'm going to go back to the Athenian notion and even Venice and some of the other city-states. They're apparently, it's really a false belief that we invented, or anybody even the ancient world invented democracy, because there are many, many, many cases around the world of various societies that have had representative, or rather um, um, councils of ordinary people, ways in which normal people who are not rulers and not elected make the decisions. And so lots of tribal societies, for example, have quite egalitarian systems where nobody stays in power and rules the roost. So I'm going to go back to calling this a representative government, but not a democracy. And I'm going to make a lot of enemies when I do that, because it's pretty offensive to say that we don't live in a democracy, because I really think we better start looking at how to improve our democracy, our government, if we want it to remain accountable at all to the people.
No, I think you're quite right, Meta. When you have small groups, namely your tribes, then you can have democracy because it's small enough that everybody can have a vote. I think now, through the miracles of social media, people can have a vote. So you can look at the Arab Spring as an example where people came together and they all voted the government out of office. But you're right, most of the time it's representative government.
Well, but look, the terrible thing about that Arab Spring thing, which of course at that time I was so excited, I thought, oh, this is a big turning point, it's going to fix everything. But these people had not had a chance to work together and discuss things in advance. They didn't know what to do. So the day that, what was his name? The longtime ruler, his name I can't remember at the moment. He steps down, says, okay, here's the keys to the palace. You come and run things if you think you can know how. They hadn't a clue what to do. They had no plans, no proposals, no policies. They had not discussed it. So they were completely incompetent. I mean, they got rid of the dictator, but then what do you do? So unless you have a situation where there's deliberation and discussion for a long period of time before reaching a serious decision, then the newcomers are not going to be any better than the dictators or even our so-called elected legislators, parliamentarians, and so on. They didn't hold up, Richard. That great.
No, I agree with you.
Yeah.
I agree with you. What it demonstrated was that you can have people voting using their cell phones for larger groups than tribes. But I fully also agree with you, yes, that they weren't planned to or have an alternative in place.
Well, sorry, Sandy.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh no, I'm sorry I interrupted you, but
No, go ahead, please.
I just wanted to suggest, though, as what Richard has described to us, and I was actually looking up on my cell phone that I get emails from an organization called Fair Vote Canada, and I think we need to keep our eye on what may happen with Bill M86, because we do have a kick at the can here about improving on the democracy if this could pass, to actually have this pass, because even where I live now, it's extremely conservative, both in the small C and big C, but even the federal conservative MP agrees with Tony McQuail, who's NDP, that he supports this idea, this fair vote and proportional representation as a conservative. So gosh, it just shows that not all conservatives are so extreme, because we have so much extreme politics happening around the world now, right? But that the hope resides in people that are still moderate and who can have dialogue together and who can agree with things across different political parties. I mean, that's our hope really globally as well as in terms of nation state, right? Yeah.
Well, is your
what is,
conservative guy going to vote for it?
yeah, what is actually happening now is that people distrust government, and when they distrust government, they tend to swing to the right and vote more conservative. And if we had proportional representation in the last election, the Greens would not have gotten their 2 votes or 2 elected off members, and the far right would have elected more people. They didn't elect any, but under proportional representation, they would have probably elected 3 people. So swinging to the right, and conservatives will vote for this proportional representation.
The party won't, though, will it?
Well, it was like when the Liberals, Justin promised proportional representation.
He promised some kind of electoral reform.
Correct. And then when he got elected, he turned it down.
Yeah, but I don't know what kind what he had promised, really. I basically electoral reform, but what does that mean? Did he actually say what exact system he was going to support?
Well, it would be a proportional representation variation.
Was it? Okay. And then he turned it down. Okay. Well, if we were really representative, we might take that and hold that against him, right? And in the next election. But
correct.
But if they allow a free vote their conscience, I don't know. You think it could pass? Sandy, do you know whether it has a chance? I have the impression it won't pass, but I'd certainly favor it.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have anything in California that are we talking about something that's totally alien, or is there any kind of move out there to change, to introduce, for example, sortition more as a way of making policy decisions?
Not that I'm aware of.
No, I don't think so.
Well, I understand. I'm going to be interviewing this week a guy whose name I can't remember right now. I can find it out. He is called let me look it up on my calendar because I have a bad memory. His name is Peter McLeod, and he runs an organization here in Toronto that hosts and organizes citizens' assemblies. And he is apparently the main expert on citizens' assemblies in Canada. And I had an hour-long conversation with him the other day, very enlightening. So we're going to have it for the camera so that I can broadcast it later this week and try to, I hope everybody will have a look at what he has to say about, he says he's organized over 100 citizens' assemblies so far. Well, that was quite new to me. I have been watching videos of people who are experts on citizens' assemblies around the world because I've become so interested in it. And they say that Canada has something like a leadership role in using citizens' assemblies, beginning with one that was held in British Columbia about proportional representation some years ago. And of course, the problem is you can have an assembly that gives advice, but that doesn't mean that your government is going to accept the advice. Sometimes they do. In Ireland, for example, they couldn't get a decision about, I think, same-sex marriage, something like that, or marriage equality of some kind. And they couldn't get a decision later about abortion because it was a Catholic country and the opinion was very divided. So they set up a citizens' assembly that ran, sortition or choosing people by lot from the entire population of Ireland. And it ran for a month or years or a long time anyway, studying the issue. And then came up with a much more progressive, well, at least favorable to abortion and favorable to marriage equality. These were two different citizens' assemblies, but I believe that then they had a referendum to adopt it. And on the basis of the recommendation by the Citizens' Assembly, both of these things I think did pass and are now the law. And Macron set up one in France to represent Paris, at least. I may be confusing two things. I think he has one going on now for all of France and another one that has completed that was representative of all of Paris, all about global warming, policies about what to do about climate change. And at that point, the commitment was, we will we will do what you recommend. It's like the government in advance says, whatever you finally decide is what we will go with, I believe. And that is quite rare. Of course, most I would love to see something like a citizens' assembly to be the equivalent of a world parliament. We need a third house in the United Nations, not representing nation states, but representing citizens of the world without regard to where they live. And so if we could do a perfect random sample of the human population and elect those people, not elect them, but select them by random sampling to put them into the parliament, global parliament in the Parliamentary Assembly of the UN, would be much more representative and much more serious body of people who could give the opinions of human beings about these global issues. So I'd be really in favor of that. I don't think anybody's going to go with that for a moment.
No, I would certainly agree with you again, Meta, that's something that should be done. The UN needs reform desperately, and I have heard that proposal, and I think it certainly has merit.
Well, the question is, how can you do a really good, it has to be a very, very accurate sortition. And of course, most people on the street, if you go up to them and say, would you like to be on a World Parliamentary Assembly or something like that, they just laugh and walk off. So you won't get a perfect sample. And that's the problem. You really need it to be representative in order to have it be credible. Well, now 85% of the human population owns a smartphone. And you could sample by just getting people's smartphone numbers and reach them that way, but they'd still turn you down most of the time. And so you wouldn't really have a completely representative sample, but you could, the question is how to get closer and closer to it, I guess. And I understand that Facebook is interested in this because so many people in the world belong to Facebook that they have now a universe that they can sample from accurately, and they could ask people if they'd like to be, a delegate and so on. And they, I think, are interested in using it as a way of getting advice or policies from the human population about how to handle AI. now you know as much about it as I do. I did read that, but I don't know any more about it than that, which I still think is a great idea, you know. Because they have billions of people on Facebook, you know.
Yeah. How would the mechanics of such a thing work? In short, if I were chosen, let's say, and I had to wind up in Sacramento for a year, do I get paid?
We wouldn't be able to, and I'm not sure that it would be desirable to make people, you know, drop their livelihood and move. No, I think the thing is that because we have cell phones, because we can do it just the way we're doing here. We break people into subcommittees, and a committee of 8 or 10 people, and they do it by Zoom. And they meet every day or however often they think they need to meet to talk about it. And then they invite experts in to tell them what they need to know, or, you know, so it can all be done in their spare time. Now, there are real limits on how that can be done. I think you'd need to have separate groupings by language, because the idea of using, you know, in the UN, they have these little things put on your ear that translates, but I don't think that's enough. I think people need to talk in their own language, and there are 6 United Nations recognized languages. I think it's 6. It could be more now. I know they've added Arabic. So if we had the word, you know, everybody into groups according to their language, and then that we'd have to have it by different zones, Western and Eastern hemispheres, because when people are asleep in you know, the Philippines, we're doing our thing here right now. So they would have to have separate meetings for the 2 halves of the world. But then, so you'd come up with solutions that would differ depending on, you might have the Western half of the world taking a position of pro on something, and the Eastern half taking the opposite point of view. And then, well, how would you reconcile that? You'd have to have a committee like they do in Congress, where the Senate and the House, after they pass their various bills, they have to get together and merge them and make them fit together. And sometimes that's a problem. But so that would be the challenge, but it would be of value to have several different inputs, because, you know, if the people speaking Chinese come up with one point of view, and the people speaking French, or let's see, what's the other? Yeah, French is one of the languages, I think, or Russian or something. If English, and if they came up with different views, then this is a good way of getting a real perspective on how the human population varies in their points of view, and all of them have to be taken account of and fit together in a way that you know, is compatible. It'll be a real challenge, but I think it can be done. I think it'll be I would just love to see something like that happen.
Yeah, I think you're talking sort of 2 different things there, Matt, compared to Bill. I think having a third organization at the UN would be having people chosen, and those people, yes, they would be paid. What you're also, though, talking about is people just using their cell phones on committees to as citizens' assemblies, and those people probably would not be paid. So
that's a good point. But the point, I'm actually saying both. What I'm saying is there's no chance in the world that the UN is going to put in the kind of thing I've just described, a global parliamentary assembly that is populated by sortition. There's no way they're going to do that. How are we going to get them to do that? I don't think we can, but we could, if we could get Facebook or Bill Gates or Buffett or somebody to give us some money. Wouldn't take very much money. I could do it with, give me $5 million and I could do it, because you just hire people to make these phone calls and, you know, do the work. We would set up a voluntary example of what a parliamentary assembly might be like if it were a world parliament. And we'd have it running by Zoom and making deliberations and reaching a proposal and solving these problems, showing how it can be done even by Zoom. And once it gets shown to people that this is really a credible operation, then I think the UN might very well say, okay, let's put something like that in. And then they could pay people to come and be there.
Yeah, I think again, coming back to your Save the World problems, is that these problems of climate, radiation, artificial intelligence, our nuclear weapons are all global problems, and we need to transcend national boundaries. And so therefore, having a global citizens group that looks at things from human security as opposed to national security is what is needed. And don't think that it's impossible. It's only impossible until it's done.
Yeah, but getting from here to there is the interesting challenge.
Well, look at
Quite
how,
sure.
oh, sorry, Richard. I was just going to say, look at how wonderful Zoom like brings us all together. And I belong to another group where every week I'm talking to people in Africa, you know, and we're learning from each other and trying to help each other with ideas and practices with our various situations. And so I think in the future, the Zoom or other ways of bringing people together using computer technology is the way to have global dialogues, like, and to really bring in more diversity and hear, you know, a diversity of points of view about why, you know, people feel the way they do, and also what we hold in common as a human family. And I think that's the missing piece right now, right? Politically and globally, in terms of the growing influence of the far right, is that, and other types of divisiveness that at all levels, in every way that people can be divided. And so what we need to do is remind ourselves and have dialogue again. And dialogue is a key word across differences, and understand what we hold in common instead of focusing so much on what divides us. And so that's part of the work I'm trying to do too, like separate from the nuclear waste issue in my own work. But I can talk about that another day. But it's really, really important, because the divisiveness that's going on in human society, it's just so destructive. And I worry about the children growing up in, you know, family and climates, school climates, and so on and so forth, where nobody can open their mouth about any, you know, any topic going on without being shut down or being accused of, you know, aggressions or bias and all of this. Like, dialogue needs to be reinvented somehow. There needs to be spaces created to bring people together, you know. And I mentioned before, that's why I do screenings on my documentary film, and I have not yet posted them on the website, because right now they're in closed audiences that are just like, you know, a one-time event at universities. And I've got one coming up at the University of Windsor, and I, you know, and I was invited by a partnership between two offices in the university. One is the Indigenous Education Committee, and the other people who invited me is called the Office of Accessibility, Human Rights, and Equity. And so these are new offices happening at the universities, which is very exciting in Canada. And and so this is like, how can we come together, right? To talk together across cultures. And so, so anyway, it's just, I'm hoping more of this can happen, and that even like what I'm trying to do, like other people could do it too, right? Like ways to bring people together to sit in an audience, watch a beautiful film. And in my case, it's on a Blackfoot man who had muscular dystrophy. And he faced persecution his whole life, even from his own people in his own community, because they were scared and didn't understand his affliction. So he experienced discrimination even within his own culture, never mind. So he became an advocate for people with disability to be treated better. And he wanted his film shown to all cultures of people, because every society has to treat people with disabilities with more dignity and respect and inclusion, right? And so that's the story, and it inspires people, you know? So we need more inspirational stories out there. Like, how do we bring people together, you know?
Well, you know, I'm going to chime in here. I think what Meta has done here when we have the whole group, you know, is kind of a rough model of what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Because we have a global contribution from Russia, from wherever, you know, coming into this. And that's what makes this gathering so important to me, that I will take 2 hours off and sit here and dialogue with you people, you know.
Thank you. I do
Yeah.
appreciate that. Yeah.
Yes.
And Richard was going to say something, and then I'll build on what Sandy has just said. Richard, what were you about to say? Hmm? Can't hear you.
Yeah.
Can't hear you. I'll tell you why I was so pleased with what Sandy was saying about the listening to each other, and what Bill has sort of complimented me on starting, because I do think this is so important. And that is that we, starting the 5th of February, we're going to be resuming more frequent programming of our talk shows, our forums, and with a specific series in mind. Now, I applied for a SSHRT grant for money to do this, but I didn't get it. And so I'm just going to try to see how far I can go before I run out of money personally. And anybody wants to contribute, of course, I'd love to have some assistance. I have to pay people to do this, to help me with this. So, but starting on the 5th of February, mostly on Mondays, almost every Monday, we'll have a forum to examine in detail 4 or 5 or 6 different proposals that have been made to that would purport to at least promise to cool the Arctic. And I think right now, probably the most serious threat facing humankind is the possibility of tipping points caused by the melting of the Arctic ice. So that we must put a lot of priority on trying to keep the Arctic colder, and not just the ocean, but also permafrost. And so we will have a series of shows on these different technological proposals. Some people call it geoengineering. You know, you can call it what you want, but the experts will be available to talk about their proposals and the tech and the science behind it over a period of, it'll keep going until October. So every week until October, we're going to be every Monday, almost every Monday, examining some of the implications of these technological proposals. And I want, of course, for the recordings to be viewed as widely as possible around the world and people to discuss them. So there'll be a place where people can post their comments or their questions. And then the next time some experts, a different batch of experts to get together to talk about the same proposal, because each proposal will be talked about 3 or 4 or 5 times before we're through. There'll be 35 shows on this and throughout the summer and fall. So you can post your questions. And in fact, I'm looking for additional people to be on the show. Now, I have only a few certain number of slots left, but I like to have people who are not experts join the experts and just keep them, question them about what they're saying to make sure that they are talking plain English and that we ordinary viewers can understand what they're saying, or that the questions that ordinary citizens would want answers to get asked, because the scientists might not, they might take it for granted, but we want to have people say, no, tell me, are you sure about this or that? That's the kind of questioning that we need. So people watching this, I've invited some of my close associates or people who belong to Project Save the World and other, a few other friends in Pugwash, for example, to ask if they, who say that they'd be willing to be on a show. And I'll pick a few here and there to put them, I can't promise everybody. In other words, don't call me and say, I want to be on your show and then be offended when I say, I don't have room for you. But I will not have room for everybody, but I would like to have some volunteers who can, you don't have to be an expert for this. You can just be a smart questioner. So I want to let everybody know that I hope you'll tune in to, you can watch it live and even send in questions, type in some questions live while it's going. And you do that by going to our YouTube site, YouTube, and ask, oh, here comes Charles Tauber. We're getting close to the end, but here's Charles. He's a usual person on the show. Yeah. So anyway, I wanted everybody to know about that, and then of course we'll post these shows and we'll submit them to our lists of friends and ask everybody to watch them. Yes, Bill Lycum.
Hey, could you send out a notice, a reminder that this is happening? Because I can't, like this coming Monday, I can't make that.
Well, it won't be this Monday. It'll be the February the 5th.
Yeah,
This is the
yeah.
first one, yeah.
Okay. But
And then
there
there's
is
one
time-
that we'll miss because all the experts are going to be having a convention someplace else. And I couldn't find anybody who wanted to talk that day. So
Yeah.
it's one day. Yeah.
It's just,
Oh, okay, I'll try to send out reminders to a lot of people to say, yeah, Marilyn. You're muted,
muted.
Marilyn. Yeah,
She's trying.
can't hear you.
Oh. Yeah,
There.
sorry about that. All I was going to say is Bill said exactly what I was going to say is to send up, to send out notices. Hopefully your computer will be working. You have your keyboard happening and that you
I'll
can
have
just
it
send
back.
out. Yeah,
Thank
that'd be
you.
great. Thank you.
Okay, good. Hello, Charles Tauber. Glad to see you. We're getting toward the last quarter of our conversation, but how's everything in Vukovar, Croatia?
Well, difficult, actually. The migrant situation is, as always, here in Southern Europe. The mayor of Vukovar has threatened to shoot migrants as they come over the Danube. So we're in, I wouldn't say, yeah, we're financially having difficulties. We're getting more groups even in Africa in particular. Um,
We should explain what you mean by groups. I should say that
Sorry.
Charles is a psychiatrist in Vukovar who works with people who are victims of traumas, war traumas, and does psychotherapy for them. So he also trains people around the world to be barefoot therapists by Zoom. And I think that's just a superb idea. So go on, Charles.
yeah, well, I mean, people evidently want what we get, what we're offering. And I'm very worried about what's going to happen in Israel, Palestine, but people are ignoring Ukraine. And I was on the line with what they call the Friends Peace Teams, the Quakers, and they're working in Iran as well. In Iraq. And we're offering what we do to everybody. But it's rough, and we're fighting for our existence. And what can I say? We just got a small grant from a Belgian foundation. But here we don't know I don't know whether people are aware of it, but there are European elections coming up, elections to the European Parliament. And that's going to be a complete mess. That's going to be very ethnically colored. We don't know what will happen with Serbia and Bosnia. It is said that the Serbian Republic, that is now part of Bosnia, may become part of Serbia. There are issues between Kosovo and Serbia. So it's pretty rough stuff. And yeah, the weather, thank goodness.
Tell us a little about that election to the EU Parliament. You know, I don't know much about that, and I don't know how it works or what. Give us a lecture on EU 101.
EU 101. Well, you know that there is the Council of Europe, which is the ministers, and they essentially make EU policy. And there is the European Parliament.
Now, the ministers are these appointed each one minister per country, or how
No,
do you get to be a minister?
well, you're appointed. These are the ministers from the actual governments of the country. And they gather, and depending on the topic, they gather periodically. So there may be
all EU countries have a ministry representative.
Right. They have various ministries. I mean, there's the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, there's the Ministry of Transport, and so on. And that's the way EU policy is made. And there has to be unanimity. And as you can imagine, that's difficult to achieve. It's very tricky. And the whole migrant policy at the moment is, to anybody who's any kind of a humanist, is absolutely dreadful. It's as bad as it is in the US or worse. People are coming across the Mediterranean in boats. They are dying in the boats because the governments are pushing them back to Tunisia, to Algeria, and so on. to Greece. A lot of them come via Turkey. Turkey is an utter and complete mess at the moment in terms of the migrant thing. Greece is a complete mess. Many people are dying on the Mediterranean. It's
Even in winter, they're still coming across on the sea at winter.
yes,
Wow.
somewhat fewer during the winter, but it's all year. And here we're right on the Danube, which is the border with Serbia. So this is the border into the EU because Croatia is an EU country. And then they go and get smuggled from here further.
Now you say there's an election, I presume, to the EU Parliament.
Right.
Now, is that all of the EU is having an election, or
Or at various
different
moments, yeah.
countries, different countries have their elections at different times?
Different countries have their elections at different times, but it's all going to be before the summer. And
You say that's going to be a
There-
mess. What's the problem, a special problem now?
what's the special problem? Ethnicity and desire for ethnic purity, and keeping immigrants and migrants out. It's abominable. And people are being sent back. Britain is no longer a part of the EU, but because of Brexit, but Germany is now started. Germany and Denmark are exporting people to third countries, to places like Rwanda and other countries. It's totally inhumane. And they're trying to get some of this to be prohibited through the European Court of Human Rights. But even when the European Court of Human Rights makes a ruling, the countries don't abide by it. So
Hmm.
it's
You're
awful stuff.
Always the real wet blanket in our conversations. Charles, you have bad news every time. And
I'm sorry.
I wish I could think of something nice to send to Croatia as it cheer you guys up and make people there stop thinking about being Croats or Serbs or whatever.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm so sick of ethnicity.
yeah, so am I. But in this town, in Vukovar, wow, it's a commonality. It's unfortunately, it's very strong.
And getting stronger, I'm afraid. I mean, you mentioned the EU elections, and we've already said that that there, I believe I read 60 or 80 countries are going to be having elections this year, the most in any one
like,
year in history. Is it 80?
I don't know the exact number, but it's more than half of the world's population will vote for a new government this year.
And they're so involved with things like this, the two wars in the Gaza war, the Ukraine war, and then there's stuff in Sudan also that's just as bad in terms of deaths.
Take a look at Congo. Take a look at Malawi. I have a group, actually a very nice group, in a refugee camp in Malawi.
In where, Malawi? you say?
Malawi, yeah.
You're, what are you doing in a refugee camp in Malawi?
We're doing the same kind of stuff we always do,
Mhm.
psychological training, and trying to, and supervision. Something that, and I know I say this every time, but I will still say it again. Simply listening to people. Simply being there and listening to people and letting them have a place where they can express their feelings, where they don't hold their emotions inside continually. That helps people enormously. Just before I came on, this is why I was late tonight. I have a client who works in another NGO here, and we speak every week, and the guy sees a lot of stuff, and he has his own personal issues, and I don't think I say 10 words the whole hour. He expresses himself and he feels much better afterwards. The people from the refugee camp in Malawi were saying the same thing. It's important that somebody is there listening to them.
I
and
think
this
I
is
can
something
I
we
can
all-
believe that, but what I wonder though, and I haven't heard anybody say that it's true, is listening is going to help the people feel better, but is it going to change their attitudes and their beliefs about the importance of their ethnic identity? If people keep on prizing their identity above everything else, then we just generate more of the same thing. And I don't know how to change anybody's attitude on that. I really don't.
Possible, but over a longer period of time, the attitudes soften. And that's really important, that you get the softening of people's attitudes. First of all, traumatized people are hard. They cannot deal with other people. They are so engrossed in their own traumas. When these emotions are released, this softens. And they're more open to change. But you have to not do this just once. You have to do this more or less, how shall I say it, over a period of years. For example, the groups we have in Nigeria, one of them at any rate has been going on for several years. And they change.
See, what I'd like
And
is to have the two people from the two opposite sides that have traumatized each other sit and listen to each other ruminate and express their grief and anger.
okay, we've done that here. This is a two-stage process. You have to work with each group separately. Yeah, they have to get their traumas out, and then they can come together. And we've had that a number of times.
May I
Oh.
ask Charles, does this incorporate a conflict resolution processes like maybe in the stage 2 part or just
Sure,
one on one?
absolutely,
Oh, good. Yeah, so conflict resolution.
absolutely.
Yeah.
We had a group for a number of years in northern Bosnia. And I would drive down there every week. And this would be very, very good. They would they first worked, and then they asked me. They said to me at one point, this really goes back a long time. This goes back about 15 years. They said, "We know you're working with the other side." I said, "Sure I am." And they said, "Well, can we meet them?" My mouth fell open, as you can well imagine. And it happens. But you have got to get them, you have got to get the traumas, how shall I say, de-weaponed, as it were, disarmed. Because if they're traumatized, and then you get into this, what we call, and I see the time, so I'll be short with this, what you call the cycle of trauma. And you see that here. And you see that, by the way, in the Middle East. People get traumatized, they transmit this trauma to the next generation or to other people, and those people in turn create conflicts which then traumatize others. And this goes on. If you look at people like Vomik Volkan and Bessel van der Kolk, and who's the guy in Australia? I'll think of it in a moment. But they've been talking about, for example, here they talk about it since the 1300s, that it's been going on here.
1300 what?
1360 or something.
Oh,
The Battle of Kosovo Polje was
yeah.
one of the first.
Charles, I got news for
yes.
you. I'm
Yes.
going to be having a forum with Vomik Volkan this week.
Oh, lovely.
Isn't it?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
I met him a
So-
couple of years ago.
If you're able to watch it live, it'll be 12:30, I think, on Friday. You could watch it on YouTube live, and then if you have a comment or question, you could send it in, and we can ask him live while he's on the show.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah.
He's a lovely guy.
Yeah. We should explain who he is while I look up the.
Sorry, he's a psychiatrist. He was at the University of Virginia for many years, specialized in this stuff, originated a lot of the theory of traumatization. I had dinner with him in Massachusetts. This goes back probably about 15 years, perhaps more.
Well, he's going to be on the show on Friday, 12:30 to 1:30 p.m. Eastern time. So anybody who's curious and interested in this, especially in this notion of the intergenerational transmission of trauma, which I think is a point that you were emphasizing.
That's exactly what I'm talking about.
Mhm.
He came here to Belgrade a couple of years ago too, before the pandemic. They're
He's
very
a
nice.
Turk. You know, he's a Turk from Cyprus.
He's mixed. He's actually mixed marriage.
Oh, okay.
But yeah. I don't know how he identifies himself these days, but he's done absolutely basic work on this stuff. And he's one of the people we cite constantly and we respect very strongly.
Yep. Good enough.
I don't know if he'll remember me, but if you do speak to him, give him my regards, but I doubt he'll remember.
Certainly mention that you are a regular on our global town halls. We're toward the end. Sorry.
And that trauma comes up in the town halls, and that's important.
I also wanted to get a show with Gabor Mate, is that his name? In Vancouver.
Gabor Mate, he's very good.
Yes.
He's
very I have a friend who knows him well, and she tried to set up a conversation with him, but he's writing a book, and he said, "Not now." So I can't do it now. But he's very
some very good stuff.
Yeah. Okay, well, look, we're getting toward the end of our hour. I want to make sure that everybody who has been holding back something that you want to share come forward and put it out here in the last 2 or 3 minutes of our little chat. I'm sure everybody has something to add. You don't see Richard Denton, but I think he's still there. Are you still with us, Richard and Biz?
I don't see him.
Maybe he went away. He was in a car. He and his wife were driving, and so we had him with us a while. But you know, when people are invisible, we don't know when they leave. Anyway, so what else do we have to add to our conversation today? Anything? Okay, well, I want to invite everybody to come back. I have to apologize that I did not get out all of the invitations and reminders that I normally send every week, before every Global Town Hall, because my computer's keyboard is defunct. And it took me all day yesterday trying to send out the few notices that I did manage to get out, and they were mostly to people who don't normally show up anyway. So I didn't know what to expect, but I'm grateful that you folks have been with me today, because I think we've had maybe because I've talked too much. I think we had a good conversation.
Yeah, I think so too.
I thought I think we've covered some important things. So, and it's always good to hear from Charles, because what you're doing is so important, and wish we could find ways of supporting everybody for all the good deeds that we're trying to do. So I'll see you
Let's
next
hope-
time, friends. Anybody else? Okay. Shall I say goodbye?
Okay.
Thank you, Meta. That was
Right.
just really
Thank you
good,
so much.
valuable.
Thank you,
Pleasure.
Matt.